Hey everybody, Edo here, and for this week's League video, I'm going to give you 10 pieces of advice that my lawyer shared with me when somebody was asking for some advice on some legal things in board games. Interesting story, you see. It actually turns out that my lawyer is my father. Don, or Donald, was a licensed IP intellectual properties and intellectual rights lawyer in the film industry for, 20, 30 years, like my entire life growing up. And then he retired and, whatever. And at some point I started Pencil First Games and, wanted some advice and some help. And he had helped on some previous things here and there. And he started doing some legal work. And so one of the interesting things he said was, I had asked on behalf of this friend if he could recommend any lawyers. And basically, I want to quote this from his email. He said, "I don't have anyone to recommend to your friend. Over the years, when I've worked with you, I haven't run into a single lawyer on the other side. It leads me to believe that transactions are too small to justify the kind of legal fees that an experienced lawyer would expect." And I think that's mostly true when you aren't a giant publisher. It's always interesting to me getting started. My dad would say things like, "You should ask for $50,000 up front." I was like, no one's going to pay $50,000 up front, man, right? Like this is not that scope and scale. And so I've been fortunate to have this high-powered veteran lawyer on my side helping out. And I'll talk a little bit more at the end, but it has been interesting going through the process of both creating contracts for Pencil First Games, as well as just reviewing the other contracts and terms and things that we've come across. Now, this is not like I'm not going to provide any legal documentation. I am not going to, I'm not a lawyer. He's a lawyer. He's removed from this video. So this is just 10 points to keep in mind when dealing with contracts. Certainly, you should get a lawyer and do it on your own. But again, the idea of paying for a lawyer on the amount of money you might have off of a Kickstarter or otherwise is, pretty challenging. Anyway, so here are 10 points that my father thought was worth sharing. 1, the owner of a game needs written contracts with all contributors. This is something he's very big on, and he's totally right. If you are doing a deal with people, you should have it in writing for all sorts of reasons. It may be that expectations changed. You never know how big a game is or what other things will come about. But certainly have written contracts with folks. If you can't have real legal documents, at least have written emails and at least simplify docs so that there's an alignment. Ideally, you'd have really good ones. So that's number 1 and certainly important. So another thing that comes up a lot, and he brings up a lot, is profit definitions need to be thought out and thought through to permit all kinds of foreseeable deductions so that payments are made only on net funds. Profits are contingent, never guaranteed, and the owner has the right to make all decisions. These are sort of 2 points, but one of the things that he's always been a big point on is honestly, especially with a Kickstarter, but with board games in general, there are all these costs that are built into generating revenue or profit. And making a contract that understands that these costs exist are really important. There are ways around this. You just have a fixed fee, and then it doesn't matter. You're just paying a fixed fee. Or you can have a per unit royalty as well. But generally speaking, understanding what people mean by costs and revenue and net, those are all key terms you really ought to understand to be successful. And also, just that you make sure it's clear that if you're the owner of the product, the game, whatever, at the end of the day, you can make any decisions necessary. One of the big important ones having to do with Kickstarter is just the right to determine if you're going to Kickstarter and when. I mean, there's a lot of expectations. Obviously, you're hiring somebody for Kickstarter, but it's really important to know and to think through what might happen. So really having a contract that imagines these different outcomes, I think, is important. And obviously he does. Number 3, All distribution deals need to be limited in time, territory, and rights. All rights not guaranteed are reserved and need to be terminable for material breach. The copyright and trademarks should be protected by appropriate notices and filings. So this has come up a lot with international deals, and it's really just about understanding and limiting and thinking about scope. In the film industry, he dealt with this with all sorts of deals, but it's really important to think through what you're licensing, signing away when you make these deals. And how are you going to follow through, communicate, and resolve that? It's a big deal. And not every contract that comes your way is going to really think about this the way you want to be thinking about it. So thinking about, again, time period for the deal, how it ends, territory and where the rights are reserved. Also thinking through how copyright and trademarks are going to be. Now, having copyrights and trademarks can be expensive if you want to sort of do it officially, but it's really worth understanding. Okay? Number 4, it's not worth entering into a deal unless there is a reasonable upfront payment. This is something that he barks on all the time, which is like, there are a bunch of these deals where they're giving you $1,000 advance, or $500 advance, or $1,500 advance. And, you know, again, coming from film industry and stuff, and lawyers who get paid legal fees, he's just like, why are you doing a deal for $1,000? You never know what else is going to happen. It's $1,000, or $500. And lots of people, that's like a standard term for these deals. And I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end when I share a couple other feedback notes from me. But it is worth thinking about, because a lot of these deals take a lot of time and follow through. And ultimately, if the only guaranteed amount of money is $500, $1,000, maybe it isn't worth it. $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. But like you think about the whole effort. And think about that you may not get any more than the guarantee or the advance or whatever. I've certainly signed some deals like that, despite this advice. But it is worth thinking about. And, you know, again, he's just saying, make it sure it's worth your time. Make it sure it's worth your time from the beginning. 5, all of the risks of the deal should be carefully weighed. This is something that's just critical when you're thinking about any business opportunity, but as a lawyer, he's been very good at helping sure I understand what happens if this, what happens if this, could this happen? What if they change their mind? What if their company is bought? What if the Kickstarter never happens? What if they disappear? What if? And going through those and understanding those risks ultimately is really critical. Okay, I was going to say this one sort of at the end, but I'll say it now. Like, your lawyer's job is to protect you at all costs. Their job is not to make money, or build the business. Their job is to make sure your business is protected in these contracts. There's a tension there, especially when it's your dad, but there's a tension there. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I get it, but I'm still going to do the deal. Or, yeah, I get it, but they won't sign these terms. I'm going to sign those other terms, and I'm going to take that risk. A lawyer's job is going to be working through so you understand and you mitigate risks. But as a business owner, you have to say, I understand, but. Yeah, okay, but. And you need to make those decisions. But knowing the risks is informing your decision. And that's really what's critical as you're balancing maybe an imperfect contract, but a big opportunity with a partner you really want to work with. 6, forms prepared by licensees usually need major changes before they are fair and even-handed. This is a big one. I'm not going to name companies, but suffice to say, we have seen many, many, many contracts over the years. And the reality is the boilerplate contracts that are in the board game industry are awful. They're really to the advantage of the person handing you their contract. And not everyone has the ability or the opportunity to create or make their own contracts, but you really need to understand that a lot of these deals where they want to license your game or use it in different regions or take it here, take it there, are written in such a way that you bear a lot of risk and they have a lot of advantages on you. And that's just how it starts. That's what it looks like. Like, everyone wants a contract in their favor. I think the thing that surprised him was just the normal like amount of sort of baseline expectations and standards, that there's no standards in the board game industry whatsoever. Some things are being written by lawyers, some things are being written by partners, some things have evolved over time. So read and understand all those terms because they'll matter. Is this a 6-6? All right, well, he has a bonus one in here, but it's minor, which is just contracts should be governed by U.S. law. Now, if you're watching this video and you're not from the U.S., don't have your contracts governed by U.S. law. The point is, have it governed by your country's law. And that can be difficult when you're doing these licensees arrangements, and obviously everyone wants their contracts to be governed by the law at hand. But, like, if there's a problem, that's the law you will be using in order to handle things. And a Chinese contract under Chinese law or German law or French law, unless you're an expert in those legal systems, you don't know what their understanding, expectations, and clauses are related to those legal systems. 7. It is doubtful that the owner will ever sue because of the high cost of lawsuits, but it is certain that it is almost impossible to bring lawsuits outside of the U.S. because of the costs and lack of familiarity with foreign markets. For those reasons, it's important to carefully check the reliability of third parties. I've had to deal with this. The reality is, if you're working with a publisher in Poland or France or Germany or wherever, any country that's not this, your country, your ability to like leverage and try to get them to do things is zero. If I have somebody in another country, like, it's basically internet shaming is your best bet, right? Like, hey, you're not paying me. I'm not going to hire a bunch of lawyers and chase after you through international courts. Like, I'm not Asmodee versus, some distributor. Like, you're a small company, and like, if you're watching this video, you're small, I think, right? Like, so you're not able to do anything. Realistically, all of it's for naught. You can't do anything. And so what he's saying is, in that world, make sure you check on your partners. You understand their business. You've looked at their website. You know what games they've done. If they are on markets, you understand where they are on markets. Simon, right? You've checked partners. I will not do a deal. Anytime I'm talking to an international company, whether I've heard of them or not, I will talk to everyone I know on the U.S. side, and I will ask them for references of companies they've worked through in the U.S. Again, you just, there's nothing you can do about it if there's a problem, realistically. And, again, that risk reward doesn't mean you shouldn't do business, but it is something that you want to keep in mind. Number 8, payments should be made upfront. Back-end guarantees are unwise. If the owner has to go back to a licensee, this is really for these international deals, to pay a guarantee, it means that the licensee hasn't made the amount it expected, so it is doubtful that the licensee will go further in the hole. I'm reading it verbatim, but basically, it's the same sort of point, which is like, what are you going to do to get that money? Oh, once a year you send them an invoice. Oh, they pay or not. I've had to chase down money. And again, you send a bunch of emails, you CC people, you maybe ask other people in the industry, you maybe make you could try to put pressure on folks, but realistically, you can't do much. And realistically, there may be other reasons people aren't paying in situations. Obviously, right now is a crazy time when many publishers are looking at their bottom lines and just deciding, I'm not going to pay these folks, right? It's particularly challenging if you're not the one manufacturing your game. I have done deals with partners who manufacture. Progressively, I've moved more towards ones where Pencil First Games manufactures the game. This is for international deals. 50% on contract, 50% when I ship you the game. Whatever country you are. In your language, in Japanese or French or whatever, Italian, German. But I have my money, you have your product, good luck, make money, whatever, come back if we want to reprint. As opposed to, they have the ability to manufacture on their own and not necessarily audit or report, you really have nothing to guarantee you're going to get any of that money back. And there are good partners in the world. Don't let this suggest there aren't good partners. There are people that it's worth taking this risk with, but to that other point, make sure you check to find out if that's who you're dealing with. And I guess lastly, sometimes good partners become bad partners. Sometimes a company that had a certain reputation fired that dude, and now the new person doesn't care about you. You know, didn't meet you at GDC. And those are things that are, or GDC's video games, at Gen Con. Those are things worth keeping in mind. All right. Number 9. At the outset, an accountant can be just as important as a lawyer. Absolutely. If you don't have an accountant, get an accountant. Understanding your finances, understanding taxes, understanding your obligations is critical, and having an accountant to help you do that is super important, especially when it comes to how to deal with Kickstarter and income and a variety of other things. But it's a big deal. So, like, probably an accountant first and maybe a lawyer. Lastly, capitalists like Bill Gates and George Lucas were successful because they treated their original ideas like gold and carefully protected them from the beginning. And, you know, everyone's heard those stories, right? And there's different examples. But, you know, if you're building a company, your value is your IP and the intellectual property you've created in that company. And the more bad deals you do and the more things you do to throw them around, the less control you'll have, and the more likely it is that you end up not with that value. And you can do that because you have some partner that undercuts you and a variety of other things, but you can also just do it with bad deals and bad contracts in particular. So, again, to my father's first point, not everyone can afford someone like my father. I certainly can't afford my father, but I've got his grandkids, so visitation rights and all that. Now it's been a real pleasure, actually. Like, just honestly, setting aside all the advice, you know, when you grow up and you know you have a dad, folks who have, you know, spent a lot of time with their dad, right? He's at work, he's working. Your relationship's very different. Then you go to college and a variety of interactions you have with your parents, right? But having the opportunity to essentially work, albeit pro bono, but work with my dad on a regular basis on these contracts and get the hounding calls and get the advice and get the, why are you doing that deal? Like, you know, all that stuff. But it offered me the opportunity to learn who he was in a totally different way than as a son. Like, as a partner, as somebody working in a business and understanding his skills and where, like, his personality rolled into a specialty really is incredible and wonderful, and something that I'm really thankful that I've had the opportunity to do with him. And so hopefully this is helpful information. It's a bunch of warnings, really, but I think they're warnings that you might not necessarily think about. So when I had this email, he didn't send me this for a video. He sent me this to send this along to the guy who was asking, but I thought it was a good enough list that I would share it online. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.